for you to, we will have a chance for you to unmute and also join the conversation towards the end of this. But I want to thank each one of you for coming on. So for those of you who know me, I'm Elaine Cunningham-Walker, Managing Director for Everything's Education, a vibrant community that is raising leaders for the next generation to make sure that our children are fully equipped to have a seat at the table, not just as a token, but also as a voice, and they become influential in this nation. And how do we do that? We do that by providing various resources, and we do that by making sure that we are giving you the very best. And I am Elaine Cunningham-Walker. I am a seasoned speaker at the Independent School Show. I had 2 children who were 2 of the top 20 brightest children in the country. So I think I know a fair share, and I went to independent school from the age of 2.5. So I am a seasoned product of what some of you are trying to achieve. Even if you don't go down the independent school route, we will support you to make sure that your child is on top of their game. Now, today we are joined by an amazing young man called Samuel Edujemfi, who's an astute tutor. I know that there are lots of parents that you've helped in our community, even recently, and they're all starting amazing schools in September, and I thank you for that, Samuel. Now, I know that there will be lots of people asking lots of questions, and I know you've got a lot to share with us about the 11 plus journey. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself and tell us more about the 11 plus journey.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elaine. Elaine is such an incredible advocate for education, and thank you so much for inviting me onto the platform tonight. Like Elaine said, my name is Samuel Edujemfi. I'm a private tutor. I run Sam Tutoring and have done so for the last 13 years. I had the opportunity to connect with Elaine a few years ago, and we've been doing great work ever since. And I think what's great about it is that we're both very, very passionate about education and changing the outcomes of young people. So yeah, I'm really, really excited to be on the platform tonight, and yeah, to hear lots of your questions and just take you through some of the things I think are really important on the 11 plus journey. So I'm going to share my screen now and begin the presentation. And I can't, Elaine will guide me if there's any really pressing questions, but I will finish fairly quickly and just give time and space for questions as well. So yes, let's get into it. Preparation for 11 plus, a guide for parents. So as I just mentioned, my name is Samuel Edujemfi. I run Sam Tutoring, and I've been doing this for about 10 years full time and about 13 years since I had the inception and the vision for this company. I started this when I was a teenager, so I've had the opportunity to really, really work with a lot of children and just see how the system works and just see lots of really, really good outcomes when it comes to education. And I think one of my pet peeves and one of the things that really frustrates me is when people don't have the information that they need. So one of my missions and one of my goals this evening is to just make sure that you leave this call with ideas, with clear strategies that you can use. And, I obviously will share my contact details, and Elaine has it as well. So if you do have any further questions beyond here, you know where to find me. If you need any help, I'm here as well. So what exactly do I do? As I said, I run Sam Tutoring. So we work with children from the ages of about 3 to 4 in exceptional circumstances. Most of our children start from about 6, but I do right through to 18. I also create content online. So to date, my content's been viewed about 50,000 times on YouTube and things like that. So I really enjoy informing parents about what they need to have the best outcomes for their children. These are some of the offers that my students have gained. I don't think I have everything here, but this is just a selection. So in terms of north, east, south, and west, I think it's just East London that I'm a bit thin on the ground in terms of offers, but a couple of the really, really prestigious schools been able to get students offers for, and so you have an idea of my background and the success I've had. I thought I would list a few of these schools. So one thing I want to say is lots of the things I say tonight will be general, but you have to make sure that with the strategies and information that I give, you apply it to your particular situation. So I definitely want to make sure that you understand that not everything I say will necessarily apply to your situation, but hopefully you have enough to be able to use it for your particular situation and just make good use of it. Okay, so what exactly is the 11 plus? Now, the term actually comes from the 19th and 20th century. The education system was very, very different post Second World War, where there were different strands of education that were set up. So 11 plus was like a rite of passage that all children had to do at one point to help place them in vocational schools or more academic schools. But nowadays, it's kind of a general term that we use for any kind of selective school at all. So that includes grammar and private school as well. So in terms of grammar, some students in the UK sit the 11 plus. So grammar schools are the only state schools in the country that are allowed to test students for acceptance. All other state schools are not allowed to do that. But as many of you know, independent schools can select whoever they want because they're separate from the state. So in terms of private school, some of the more prestigious senior schools, so your Etons, your Harrows, your Winchester, they have pre-tests, and some of them also use the common entrance. Now, I will be doing a webinar with Elaine in a few weeks on the common entrance, but I thought it would be useful just to mention that here as well. So you obviously have the Harrow test and the Eton list test, as well as the common entrance. For schools like Eton, the application process is 3 years long. So if you are going to commit to that, or that is something you're aspiring to, I think it's just essential you understand what you're getting yourself in for. So I will be talking a lot more about that in the next webinar I do with Elaine. So I just thought I'd mention that here. So in terms of independent school, most children that enter the independent school system do the 11 plus, so enter from year 6 into year 7. So this is obviously where it's the most congested. There are other entry points at 7 plus and 8 plus. So we're talking year 3 and year 4. For some very, very oversubscribed schools, that is a technique and a strategy that parents have been using. So for example, Westminster is very, very oversubscribed and quite difficult to get in. So what parents have been doing is preparing or allowing their children to be prepared for the 7 plus or the 8 plus. So once they're in, they get automatic entry through to the senior school as well. Obviously, children taking the 7 plus and 8 plus are much younger than those taking the 11 plus. So that can be a consideration that you can think about as well. And I think it's also interesting now that I'm seeing more and more parents use the 7 plus and the 8 plus as a practice for the 11 plus. So even if they don't get in and they're not successful, their children have had a good grounding and understand a bit more about how the kind of testing system works. So when 11 plus does roll around, they're already experienced. So they use 7 and 8 plus as a bit of a practice ground. So the primary purpose of the 11 plus is to evaluate a child's academic ability. With independent schools, obviously the massive draw for independent and grammar schools is the fact that the standard of education does tend to be a lot higher than the corresponding state schools. And Obviously, everybody on this call wants their children to do well. And we know that having the right school, a good education, is a massive springboard to really, really positive outcomes later on in life, be it university, careers, emotional development, social development. So what the 11 plus is essentially designed to do is to discriminate between children that will do very well in a certain academic environment and maybe those who maybe independent school or grammar school isn't quite for them. So what exactly does the 11 plus consist of? So it's rooted in the Key Stage 2 curriculum. But one thing that I'll say, which might be quite surprising to parents, is that the Key Stage 2 curriculum alone won't be enough for the vast majority of schools. You need to be far beyond that. And it's not uncommon for me to be teaching some of my 9-year-olds, some of my 10-year-olds, foundation GCSE level. One thing that works quite well, especially with 11 plus preparation. So for those of you who have children in state schools that do year 6 SATs, you prepare to such a level that they end up finding the SATs incredibly easy and very, very straightforward. So all of the children that I prepare successfully for 11 plus do very, very well in their SATs because they've had to go above and beyond what is required of the Key Stage 2 curriculum. So one thing that I find quite frustrating is people think that the 11 plus is essentially a black box, that it's super competitive, that it's all of these things. And yes, it is. But all it is English, maths, and derivations of English and maths. So your verbal reasoning and your non-verbal reasoning as well. So there's nothing additional to what they have learned that they're expected to know, but they're expected to know the Key Stage 2 curriculum inside out. So I've divided it between English, maths, verbal reasoning, and non-verbal reasoning. I really want to go into what each one is and what is required for each level. So for English, it's split into 3 different areas: comprehension, composition, and grammar. Okay. So starting with grammar, key areas to focus on when you are preparing for the 11 plus are things like contractions, omissions, apostrophes, punctuation, that hopefully by the time they are in year 3, year 4, year 5, they've got a good grasp, forming plurals, using commas, splicing, run-on sentences, subject-verb agreement, punctuation, speech. So a big thing around this that you can encourage your children to do, and just things you can be doing in the background, are things like extra reading. Let them watch documentaries of things that interest them. Sometimes turn on the subtitles. So they're not only hearing vocabulary, they're not only learning new words, but they're seeing how they're spelt as well. You can do very, very interesting things when it comes to creative writing, which we'll get onto in just a second when it comes to punctuation. But punctuation is like a really, really effective tool that children can use to bring their writing to the next level. Nearly all children know about commas, about full stops, about all of these things, but very few of them will be able to use them in creative ways to allow their writing to stand out. Then we've got comprehension. So this is probably the most familiar part of English that your children are already familiar with. So we've got 5 different areas that we need to be able to accurately describe and write in. So being able to identify the meaning of words and phrases. Again, an increased vocabulary will really help with this. Literal reading, so to be able to understand exactly what happens in a passage of text. And I think this is often taken for granted, but the ability to read and understand in real time is actually a skill in itself. So sometimes with the pressure of exams, it's very easy for children to misunderstand what's going on, but this can be overcome by just more reading, more practice, especially under timed conditions. Inference, so being able to understand what's going on in the text and what is not being said. So, do we understand what subtext is? Do we understand what the writer is trying to articulate? Because sometimes it's not what's written that is the main thing, it's what's unwritten. Having a good understanding of different techniques and literary devices, so things like metaphors, similes, hyperbole, all of these different literary devices. How do we make our writing more colorful? How is the writer able to paint a vivid image of whatever's going on? And then taste an opinion, being able to evaluate and form an opinion. So during a lot of these exams, it's not just about what is being said, it's also about how does the student interpret what's being said? What does it mean to them? Are they able to assimilate the information and draw reasonable conclusions from what is being said or asked? And then we've got composition. So this can be split into two areas. So narrative writing, so that's essentially telling a story. It could be a story, a description, a concept. It could be anything. And then we have persuasive writing, where you're making a case for something. You're making an argument. You're writing in a balanced manner, whereby you're considering multiple points of view. For me, I think children need to go into these sorts of creative writing exercises already with plans in the bank. You should not be thinking about what you're doing in an exam. The way I prepare the students that I teach is that they have a whole list of stories that they can adapt, because there's only really so many prompts that they can give you when you're writing a creative story. You're going to obviously have a beginning, introduce characters, have some kind of conflict. The story is going to reach its peak. There's going to be a resolution, and then you're able to come down. And in between that, we can add all of our literary devices, all of our different plans, all of our different techniques to make it really come alive. And this is something that I not only do with my 11 plus students, I also do with, my GCSE students as well. It's a very, very similar skill. Persuasive writing, I think it's essential that children have a wider understanding of the world around them. It allows them to form really, really powerful arguments, see how other people form arguments as well, and also allows them to think critically as well, because you want to be able to think. And I think that's one thing in this generation that they're slowly being robbed of, the ability to think. So we look at multiple different things when we prepare for the 11 plus. Now looking into maths. So broadly speaking, and this will depend on the specific school that you're going for. Obviously, if you're going for a school like Eton and you're doing additional mathematics, it won't be just this. You will have to go a bit deeper than this, but you're looking at these 7 topics. So place value, negative numbers, fractions and percentages, decimals, number patterns, averages, probability. So these are the core concepts that before you take an 11 plus exam, you should have, in your locker. You should be able to really have a very good grasp of that. But it looks very simple, but the questions asked will go deep into each of these different areas. So although on the surface, your child might be very comfortable with this in principle, the way questions can be asked can be, a bit tricky. So we need to familiarize ourselves with not just these topics, but also how questions are asked and the different ways that we can approach them. As I said before, it's not uncommon for me to be teaching 9-year-olds GCSE. So looking at the problem solving, we've got our now core knowledge. We also need problem solving. So this is how we apply the core knowledge. One thing that children at this age are not always used to is always showing they're working in a really neat, succinct way. So that's one of the skills I have to constantly be drilling in, that yes, I know you understand it. I know you understand how to do the question, but you need to be able to sequence your work in a way that even if you make a mistake, you're at least getting some of the marks for working. All questions should be attempted. It's a crime absolute crime for any of my students. I call them the Samily, to leave a question blank, even if you don't know what to do. We do this thing, we call it internally scrapping. So you're just scrapping for marks, that even if you don't know what to do, you give it a good go. What part of the question do you understand? Because you could potentially at least get marks for that. But if you don't write anything, you definitely won't get any marks. And obviously problem solving and just building that resilience as well. You can think about a problem, but sometimes it's about taking your pen out and just playing around with the numbers, just writing down something. Because oftentimes when you move this here, try this, something will click. But just sitting and looking at the paper and feeling dejected and defeated is just not an option. So that's broadly speaking maths. Now we look into verbal and non-verbal reasoning. I think, as it says here, these are the a bit more tricky to prepare for because they're not necessarily intuitive. They're based on all of the other skills that you have. So you'll have a bit of maths in there, you have a bit of algebra in there, you also have some English, some vocabulary, some punctuation, all of these things to put them together, to be able to reason, to be able to figure out whatever it is that the question is asking you to do. So they're essentially like code breaking activities, verbal and non-verbal reasoning. So they're a bit more tricky to teach. So what I find with verbal and non-verbal reasoning is you need to be able to just practice and familiarize yourselves with the different types of problems that you have. Now, obviously, not all schools use verbal and non-verbal reasoning. It really is dependent on where you're applying. But what you must do is be aware of the type of examinations for the type of school that you're applying. And that's what we do. One of the first questions that I ask all of my parents is, do you have a short list of schools that you're interested in? And that allows me to plan what the curriculum is going to look like, because there's no point planning for, I don't know, a Royal Russell exam when you're actually supposed to be preparing for the Harrow exam. They do testing in a slightly different way. Yes, the content might be similar, but how children respond to examination format is almost, I said almost, not exactly, but almost as important as the content that they're learning. Because you can work hard going through all of the content, but if you don't have correct exam technique, it's all in vain. So that's how you get very, very capable children maybe not progressing through the application of an independent school or grammar school, not because they don't know the information, but because they haven't been exposed to the examination technique and the examination format in enough detail that it becomes second nature. With the amount of resources that are available today, there's not really a good reason why you should rock up to an exam and not be absolutely prepared. And yes, you can have a tough question here and there, but it should be somewhat familiar. So yeah, there are a number of core areas assessed in verbal reasoning and non-verbal reasoning, which are important that your child prepares effectively. So let's look at some of these core topics that are looked at. So with verbal reasoning, you're going to be constructing words, understanding words, meaning, because you might have to produce synonyms or alternatives, workings with numbers and algebra, developing logic skills. So again, there's this idea of strong vocabulary. If you know what words mean, you can replace words in sentences and change the meaning, because what they're looking for is, they know that most of them are going to understand the maths component, the algebra component by this stage, but you're going to have a bit of an edge if you know really obscure words, especially at their age. So read more widely, watch interesting things, read a lot of non-fiction, fiction, all of those things, and also even conversations, any kind of discourse. It might even be, we've just come out of an election. The debate was quite interesting to watch. Some of the words that were used by, politicians and hustings and the televised debates, they're just really, really interesting ways that you can get words, because not everybody's necessarily going to sit down and read everything, but you can be consuming information all the time from the world around you in a really subtle way that helps with examination preparation. And then moving on to non-verbal, change pictures into shapes, picture moves, algebra, matrices, which are those squares. So you have those 3 by 3 squares, and you might have to find the odd shape out. You might need to predict the next shape. So they can ask you a myriad of things. Non-verbal reasoning, in my opinion, is very, very close to maths. If you're good at finding patterns in maths, it does tend to translate quite well for non-verbal reason. But again, it's something that you need to practice, because I'm going to assume not all of you necessarily need tutors, but what you can do, and if you do it yourself, one thing you're going to need to do is just understand what you're getting yourself into and have a plan. It's just really, really key. It is possible to do. What you're doing with tutoring is essentially paying for the convenience of somebody that understands all of these things to just kind of take that work off your hands and give you advice and direction. But it is possible for you to do it yourself. You just need to know how your child is going to be assessed. So you want to start as early as you can, and just develop that familiarity, and just let the skills compound if you can. So just do it subtly. Now, what is a good score on the 11 plus? Now, as many of you are aware and know, many of these schools are very, very oversubscribed. You know, there are some schools that have 7 applicants to 1 place. But typically speaking, from what I found in my years of doing this, a competitive application, of course, you never know, and you can never say if a child will 100% get in, but a very, very good competitive application, you want to be scoring at least 80% across the board. If you're going for a scholarship or a bursary, normally you would have to be, and this changes from school to school, but you want to be in the top 10% of students in that cohort. So you're looking at maybe, 90, 95%. But again, this will depend on how strong the cohort is, how difficult the exams are. But these are kind of figures that I kind of live by internally when I'm preparing students as well. So in the kind of data that I'm looking at, that I'm looking for when we do practice exams, I'm looking for at least 80% to be confident that we have a very, very good chance of getting offers to any of these schools. Now, let me go into resources. I think this is probably, if not the most important part of the presentation tonight. There are a myriad of resources that you can use. And I think depending on the exam that you're doing will depend on the resources that you use. For me, for common entrance, I feel like the ISEB past papers and practice papers that they provide are fantastic. The textbooks that they
Sorry,
create.
Sam, I
Yes.
don't want to cut in there too much, but because we're doing 11 plus, that's very separate from 13 plus
Okay.
common entrance.
Yeah,
So
no problem.
leave that information to when you do the 13 plus. I think that would be really
Yeah, no
helpful because
problem.
we don't want to confuse parents
Of course.
because the ISCB, I think that is brilliant, but there are also other things that you can use just because, my children went through the common entrance. So, yeah, I know the common entrance inside out.
Yeah,
But yeah, I
absolutely.
just don't want to confuse parents because we're talking about living there.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, Elaine's absolutely right. Yeah, the ICB is more so for common entrance. But things like Atom Learning, I think Atom are very, very interesting because as well as being a learning platform, they also do the examinations for a lot of these schools. So for me, if you are applying to a school that is using Atom Learning to conduct the examinations, it's kind of non-negotiable to be familiar with the platform. Now, I must say, a kind of premium subscription to Atom that gives you everything that you need can be quite pricey a month, but some schools have packages whereby they include it, especially lots of the prep schools include it in their offering as well. So there are kind of ways around it. And I know they do workshops around 11 plus and exam preparation and things like that. So Atom Learning, have been around for a few years now, and they have quite a large foothold in the 11 plus market at the moment, whereby they provide resources for parents, but they also do the examinations as well. Pretest Plus is one that I use quite a lot. Not so great for the actual learning, but if you need practice examinations, they're very, very good. One thing I would say is when it comes to official examinations, so some of these schools produce release past papers, not a lot of them, but some of them release past papers. You want to leave official documents and official testing for as late as you can, because you don't want to do them too early. So Pretest Plus is great for practice examinations. So you can do test after test after test. They have a subscription model, and they also have you can buy individual tests. Pretest Plus have a sister website called, I think it's called Exam Plus, but they're very, very good for the Sutton Consortium. So for those of you who live in South and are considering grammar school as part of the Sutton Consortium, the Exam Plus, Exam Paper Plus, which is basically the sister site of Pretest Plus, is the best I found for the first round, the set examination. Obviously, you've got your classic bond books. I think bond books are good when you're starting out. So when you're maybe year 3, year 4, you're starting out, bond books are great for timed comprehensions, and they have workbooks as well, so you can actually learn content as well. Remember I said earlier on that if you do go to a state school and you're doing SATs, preparing for the 11 plus will inadvertently also help you prepare for your SATs papers as well. There are websites that have free SATs papers from the last 20 years. So before, it's been phased out now, but there used to be year 9 SATs. So that's a step above the year 6 SATs. Those have been really useful for me when I'm preparing my students as well, because I can test them at a higher level. You've kind of got a nice medium between the SATs and GCSE. So it's not quite as hard as GCSE, but it's right in the middle. Normally, if my students are clocking, 70, 80, 90 on those types of harder exams, it's a very, very good indication that their subject knowledge, especially around the comprehensions, compositions, and lots of the maths content, is at a very, very strong level. And then obviously you've got your CGP and LETs. They're more generalist. You probably want something a bit more specific to the school that you're applying to. But CGP is great if you just want to get a grounding of the types of questions that are going to be asked. But it's not the best when it comes to specific preparation. And then you've got, Schofield and Sims and buffer testing as well, which they all do kind of mental arithmetic and really specific things depending on the school you're applying to as well. And obviously, don't forget to also look at, you definitely have to look at the individual schools as well, because they will have their own assessment materials, specimen materials. Sometimes they come with mark schemes, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you have to make your own. But yeah, there is so much information out there, and it really does depend on the particular test that you're going for. But before you take the exam, you really, really, really need the right resources. So along with practice and learning content, you have to have the right resources, because that's what's really going to make the difference. And also a scheme of learning, so you know exactly what you have to know for the exam. So how can obviously somebody like myself help? So myself and the tutors that I work with, we basically like to take an individualized approach. Each child is different. Each child has particular needs. So it's really, really important for me to establish where we are, understand what the aspirations are, and build a bridge in terms of a plan from where we are and where we need to get to. Ideally, you want to be starting, you want to give yourself at least 12 to 18 months preparation. So, end of year 3, beginning of year 4 is a good time to be thinking about. Starting the process. You don't necessarily need tutoring at that stage, but I think you should start to be gathering information and developing an idea of what's important to you, what you're looking for, and the schools that you're looking at. You don't have to just go to open days the year before the applications are due. You can do them as early as possible, so you can get a feel for the school. Because remember, on open days, you're essentially seeing a very, very polished version of a school. But some schools allow you to see lessons happening on a normal, mundane Tuesday and just see what learning looks like and if your child would fit in there. And when you're having these conversations with staff and you're asking questions, I know Elaine is fantastic at this, that she prepares her clients and the people that are part of the community beforehand to go in to ask specific questions as it pertains to your specific situation. See if you can have conversations with the teachers, because the headmaster is great, but he's not the one that's going to be actively teaching your child day in, day out. It's going to be the teachers. Do you like what the upper years look like? Because your child is going to be nurtured in this environment. So you need to look at some of the older years, have conversations, listen to what their aspirations are, listen to what their experiences have been, and you can use this to really build a picture of, will this be a good fit? Me, I'm quite meticulous in terms of how I plan things. So I enjoy kind of data and, all of those kind of things. So the things that may be important to you may be, to be honest, academic prowess is going to be good at the vast majority of these schools. So, diversity might be important to you. It might be sport, it might be arts, it might be leavers destinations, it might be a myriad of things. Note down the things that are important to you, and then you can start ranking schools and giving schools scores based on the things that are important to you. This is what I do when I'm working with parents and when we're, deciding, what schools we're going for and things like that. So that this school would be top in maybe diversity, but not so great in sport. Another school might be great in I don't know, leavers destination, but not be so great with pastoral support or send or, anything like that. If you are looking for further resources, as I mentioned before, I create content online. So you can look at any of the videos on the Sam Tutoring YouTube channel, where I kind of do deep dives into the key things that you need to know about prep schools, private schools, independent schools, some of the resources you may need as well. I made this video, the second video, a couple of years ago. So I've updated that because there's always new resources about and more information that is being garnered all the time. So do definitely have a look at that if you have time. And yeah, this is how my process works. Start off with a consultation. So we evaluate everything. So sit down with the family and understand what the goals are, what you're trying to achieve. Me and Elaine get to collaborate with, quite a few families as well. So we're always sharing expertise. We're always coming to each other with, various scenarios and various problems. And, everybody that knows Elaine knows that she is the gatekeeper for the for the mums of the world when it comes to independent school, especially from the Africa continent. She's the big boss. So it's an amazing resource that you all have, being able to connect with Elaine. And obviously we're able to work together and just really support you in your journey. I'm happy to, jump on calls, answer questions, all of those things. So once I put together a plan, I perform assessments, and that may be me listening to them read, me performing maths, English, creative writing, verbal, non-verbal reasoning. I establish a baseline of what is needed establish a baseline of where the child is at right now. So you may feel that your child should be at City of London, should be at St. Paul's. I'll be able to have a look at, okay, well, based on the children that I've supported and the academic level at which they're at, we need X amount of work. It's possible, but how much time do we have? Do you really want to go to the school? Are there other options we've thought about? Because my thing is, I don't think you should ever lower your aspirations, but you should always have a plan. There should be a strategy of how we're going to get from A to B. And you want to give yourself as much time as possible. So if anything changes, if something isn't working, we can pivot, we can adjust and do what we need to do. And once parents are happy with the plan I put together, sometimes I write a report as well, then we begin delivering sessions. So for everybody that is part of Elaine's network, on the booking form that we have, you can just type in the code Elaine, and that automatically gives you 40% off a consultation. The link for the booking form is there as well, but Elaine has all my details. So if you do need any support, any help, you can definitely reach me. All my details are on samtutoring.london, and you can email me as well. So I'm now going to open the floor for questions. I did want to just give a brief overview because I know that there'll be many of you that have questions. So I'm going to pass back over to Elaine to moderate, and yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Sam. Adiola, I don't really know what's going on with your screen, but you seem to be on. Is there a way that you can turn off your screen? Because your screen is on, but it's black. I'm not really sure what's going on there. If you could turn it off just because we're recording. But thank you so much for that, Sam. Somebody has asked me for the link. You are currently in the Everything's Education community, so I will post that in the community group. Somebody also asked, is your tutoring online or in person? Now, I know the answer to that, and maybe you could answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a hybrid. So depending on what the particular needs are, because online tutoring doesn't suit every single child. So obviously for the children that I teach that live outside of London or live outside of the country, we offer online, but where possible, I do try to have in-person sessions. Even for the children that I teach that go to boarding school, we have a program for them where they come over to the offices here in South London, and they might spend a week with me, and we do intensive and things like that. So I basically sit down with each individual family, see what they need, and I give recommendations based off of that. But yeah, to answer your question, we do offer both, but it's always my preference to do in person.
Okay, somebody asked, what's the best way of prepping a child for non-verbal reasoning before the 11 plus, i.e. a 7-year-old?
Yeah. Okay. So I would find websites like Pretest Plus are very, very good for practice examinations. Their past papers can be a bit pricey, but I don't think there is a better way to do practice with non-verbal reasoning other than just doing as many papers as you can. There are some really, really good books as well that you can buy that show you how to kind of work out non-verbal reasoning questions. There's a framework called SCANS, where you look at things like size, color, and all of those things, and do it systematically as well. But I think once you've done a few exams, they become quite intuitive. But you can't be discouraged if you start off, or if your child starts off getting really, really low marks. You just have to keep on practicing and just make iterative adjustments each time. So yeah, best way to do nonverbal reasoning is with practice examinations.
Love that, love that. Now, somebody said, the same person asked, for the resources, how do you know the best resource for prepping for the target school? and their assessment criteria. Now, I know that a lot of schools are not very transparent about this. My thing is just be the best, and then you can't go wrong. What are your thoughts on that, Samuel?
Yeah, so I think certain books work better for certain examinations. Like I have a preference for certain books. Like I really, really like Pretest Plus for something like the Sutton Consortium because I feel like their examinations that they do, their practice examinations mirror the real thing very, very well. So if you're doing well in their examinations, you're likely to do well. But all of the companies that I've mentioned in the presentation are established companies. So their resources will be useful. It's just preference in terms of what you enjoy and what you don't, because there are some textbooks that I have, because I buy everything because I like to constantly see what's going on in the space. And when I'm doing lesson plans, it's nice to be able to refer to different textbooks, but there are certain things that I like when it comes to textbooks. So things like formatting, color, and things like that, because children are very, very visual. So I think it's if a company are very good at presenting their information very well, I think that's a massive bonus. So like Hodder Education, formerly what they called before
Galore
Galore
Park.
Park.
For
Yeah,
Galore,
Galore Park.
for Galore Park, sorry, I just wanted to come here. For Galore Park, it's a very good resource to use if you're going for Westminster.
Yeah,
But it's not really that important a resource to use if you're going for Royal Russell, two totally different schools. Royal
absolutely.
Russell you can do on Bond's book and on Schofield and Sims. You don't have to be on Galore Park because
Yeah.
if your child is able to get through the Galore Park curriculum, then Royal Russell is not really the school for them.
Yeah,
Does
absolutely.
that make
And yeah, I just think they make very, very good books. But yeah, just like Elaine said, it really does depend on the particular school. If you are applying for a school that uses Atom Learning, for me, and I know it's a bit controversial because they are the people that are kind of playing both sides, as in they get parents on their platform and they're also the ones doing the testing. But for me, I think um, it would be a mistake not to familiarize yourself with the Atom Learning platform if you are going to an Atom Learning school, because the children that do have that advantage will just have such a marked advantage on yeah, just have a marked advantage. So yeah, for the Atom Learning, I would say definitely invest in that. Yeah, and all the others, it really does depend on the school.
I wanted also to add to Atom Learning. Actually, my friends are the owners of Atom Learning. And so one thing that I had cited with them, which they don't want to admit to, is yes, they are playing both sides, but Atom Learning on its own cannot get you into the school. You have to have a tutor going through the information with you to make sure that your child has absorbed it in the right kind of way in order to deliver it correctly in the examination. Because what Atom Learning will not do is teach you how to answer those questions. What they'll do is they'll just give you familiarization with what the examination looks like. But in terms of the speed in which you answer, the accuracy with which you answer, that comes with somebody like Sam sitting alongside your child going, where did you go wrong here? How could you have done this better? I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Elaine's
Next,
absolutely right. Yeah.
thank you. Next question is, when is too late to start working towards 11 plus? Well,
Um,
mm,
hmm, it's
anyway,
a,
see,
it's a,
me, I
it's a,
like the drip. I like the drip, the drip, the drip, teaching children in stages. That last minute dash to the finals doesn't work for every child, and you could end up with a child with breakdown.
yeah. I think it's a difficult question to answer because there have been situations whereby we've started very, very late and we've managed to get them over the line. But ideally, you want to start as early as possible. So I would say between 12 and 18 months of just gently building up. Because the thing about preparing for the 11 plus as well, and I kind of compare this to preparing for a boxing match. You want them to peak at just the right time, because sometimes what can happen is that they peak a bit too early, and then it's very, very easy to get complacent. Whereas somebody that's just gently building, 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 so when they reach fight night or the day of the exam, they're just ready and raring to go, can perform much better than somebody that's maybe been preparing for a bit longer. But just like with everything, more preparation, you're giving yourself a better chance. But I have had situations whereby, we've had 3 months, we've had 2 months, and we've done what we needed to do. But again, it's not for every child. And also, not every parent feels comfortable going. Because to be honest, if you're going for like a Westminster and you're coming to me with 3 months, I'm going to be very, very honest with you, because the level and how deep you would have to go would be very, very difficult for most children. So, and my thing is safety of the child first. Like, we're not going to kill ourselves for the 11 plus, because another thing that we can do as well, and what kind of parents are waking up to, you take your child to a very, very good performing state school. I know they're very few and far between, but you take them to, for example, a Brampton Manor, and then, they have a tutor like me, because a lot of my students are in year 8, year 9, year 10, and we're working together for, that duration of time. You're saving money, plus you're getting, the extra support that you need. Because another thing that I think is really important to mention as well is about, I would say at the moment, about 70% of my clientele go to private school. So even the ones that are already in, you know, they're still getting tutoring and still getting support. Now, you don't necessarily need that, but parents are finding that they're looking for that extra support and things like that. So, how late is too late? It depends completely on your child, but you want to give yourself as much time as possible. But if circumstances don't allow that, I would have to take it on by case basis and just understand where we're at and kind of what we need to do.
Okay. Yeah, I think that it's important to be realistic and start having the conversations as soon as possible. Because when you look at your Asian counterparts, my son's friend won it was then the Queen's Scholarship at Westminster, now the King's Scholarship, at 13 plus. He was starting from year 2, like 3 hours. But Asians are a different breed. I'm just telling you, people, that's what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah,
Now,
and another thing I'll add to that, especially with the families that I work with that are from like China or Hong Kong, I have the youngest student that I teach now is 4 years old, and they're a family from Hong Kong. And I was very reluctant to take this on, but I said, okay, let me see. The level at which she's at right now is like something I've never seen before, and she's already been having tutoring from when she was 2, 3 years old. Like, you don't necessarily need to do that, but these are the sorts of people that are preparing their children for the Westminsters, the City of Londons, and things like that. She called me a few weeks ago, and we got her results back for her test. And when you're in primary school, obviously you're doing like emerging, expected, greater depth, and things like that. The very fact that all of her ticks weren't in the final column meant that that's not good enough. And I've been tasked with making sure that she's at least 2 years ahead of where she's supposed to be, so she can prepare for the 7 plus and 8 plus in the next couple of years. So, yeah, those are the sorts of people that you're competing with. I think, no, competition is the wrong word. Those are the people that are also in the cohort
no, it's the
when,
right word. Competition. You're competing for a place. It's the right word, Sam. Don't
yeah.
shy away from it. You're competing
Mm,
for a place. It's a competition, and the competition is who is the best. When you apply, when you start running for the Olympics, there's only 3 places: gold, silver, bronze.
mm.
Anything after that, yeah, you did well. You got to the Olympics, but you didn't win.
Yeah. And
Um,
and I think as well, I try to change the narrative as to what's best for your child, because on paper, Eton's amazing, City of London's amazing, but will your child be happy there? Because some children don't do well when they're not the big fish in the small pond. So if you're going from like a prep school whereby you've been patted on the back and you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then you go to Eton and you're on the bottom set for everything, it can do things to confidence which, may not be in the child's interest. But having said that, some children really, really flourish when they have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. When, I'm not the best. No, I have to be the best. But not, some children are not naturally competitive. So yeah, Elaine's right. You are competing for a place. But I would change the narrative slightly, and it's like, what does winning look like for your family?
Okay, perfect. Can a child be tutored in one subject like creative writing?
Yes, absolutely. Like we tend to manage everything. So when I do my consultations, I look at everything. So their maths, their English, their writing. I look at the baseline there, and then we plan for there. But yes, if you're already sorted in an area and you need something else, yeah, absolutely, that can happen. Yes.
Okay. Someone said, when do you introduce formal test papers and how often would you suggest children take them in the run up to the exam?
So you should be by the run up to the exam. So let's say the last 12 weeks, last 12, 15 weeks, you should be doing sets of papers, like 2, 3 sets every week. Because what you want to do is just build a data bank so you can see how the child is progressing. Because what you want to do is just be at optimum examination level by the time they take the exam, because you don't want to peak too early, but it should be regular. There shouldn't be a past paper you haven't seen before. But I would caution against doing everything too early. You want to learn as much of the content as possible, because the formal past papers are the only real simulation that you have of what the exam's going to be like. If you do them too early, they lose a bit of their power, because you want to see them completely blank and see how your child would do if they took the exam tomorrow. So I always try to make sure that we do them as late as possible, but you need to be able to learn from each paper as well. So if you're dropping 10 marks in a maths paper, where did those 10 marks go? Okay, I was weak in fractions. I was weak with my decimals. Let's go back and learn the content, then do another paper. Okay, I've dropped only 5 marks. Where was I weak there? So you just keep on doing that iterative process until you get right up until the exam.
Thank you. Somebody's child is coming back from being abroad into year 5 in September. She said, what should I start to do to first prepare? Should I go straight into tutoring?
Um, it depends, because if they're not used to tutoring or they haven't been tutored before, it may take a bit of time to just warm up. And how far is the child away from where I would consider to be a very competitive application? Obviously, when you're coming back and you're reacclimatized into UK culture, that can be a bit of a culture shock as well. So yeah, it really, really does depend. And also the schools that you're going for, because another thing to mention is some of these 11 plus schools are not as competitive as others. With some schools, if you're able to pay full fees, they're not really looking too hard at the academic, performance. Just some schools, especially when you go into like the country and things like that. But London and some of your prestigious senior schools, they are going to be very, very competitive. So I would say it depends on your school that you're going for. It depends on the academic level that they're at right now, because some children don't even necessarily need tutoring, maybe just more so exam technique for the last, I don't know, 6 months or 3 months or however long that you have. So it really does depend.
Now, there's a question here which I think is very dependent, child dependent. So the question is, how significant is the difference in the performance of the child who prepares from 7 plus and those who start 18 months prior? Now, the, I'm going to answer it and then you also answer it. Now, it depends what the educational route is that you're going for. And yes, you might be going for 11 plus, but what I do not like doing is putting undue pressure on children, number one. Number two, you can see that there are children who start at 7 plus who are outperforming the people who start 18 months before. You might all get in, but one might get a scholarship and one might just get in. It's what you are want. If you are going in to get a place that is outstanding, so your child is outstanding, I would say start early. However, if you want to do the 18 months, and it also depends on what your bag is, what your budget is as well. But tell me what you think, Sam.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, children mature at different rates. A lot of the reason why 7 and 8 plus doesn't work for younger children is because just the academic maturity isn't there. Because even though it's
No, no,
parents
no. I think
saying,
you're mistaken. The question is,
okay,
what's the significant difference in the performance of children who start preparing at 7 and 8 plus
oh, sorry,
and
yes.
those who start 18 months prior to 11 plus?
Yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood the question.
Mhm.
I would say at 7 and 8 plus, you've had the opportunity to go through the system. And this is why I feel like it's useful, especially if you have lofty aspirations, to even treat the 7 or 8 plus as a bit of a testing ground, as a practice. Because for some schools, it's so competitive at 11 plus that it may even be in your interest to give 7 plus a go. You don't get in, it's okay. We can, tweak things and we can look at the preparation for 11 plus. Of course, if you perform very, very well at 7 plus or 8 plus, and that kind of level of nurturing continues, you will have an advantage over children that are sitting the 11 plus. But again, a nice, proper preparation from year 3, year 4, even year 5 in some cases, you'll be absolutely fine. Because I feel like once you arrive at these schools, confidence, academic maturity, all of these things are just so important. Because one thing that I see as well, which I think is a mistake that parents make, is once they get into these schools, they think that the work is done. Yes, to an extent, you can now say academically things should be moving in the right direction, but you still have a lot of work to do, in the sense of parenting and confidence and things like that. Because I was on a call yesterday with a parent who's not happy with how her son is performing in end of year 10 mocks. And child goes to Harrow, and he's doing very, very well relatively to his peers. But obviously Harrow is an elite environment, so he's kind of middle of the road. And I was explaining to her that it's more so the infrastructure that he has now, because up until now, doing common entrance, doing 11 plus, all of these things, mum has been the driving force. But now with GCSEs, it's more so they need to be able to know how to study and all of these different techniques. So in closing, I think there will probably be a difference if the intensity is continued, but there's no good reason why, without proper preparation beforehand, if you don't want to take the 7 plus or 8 plus, or you think is a bit early, why you shouldn't have a good go. But also just be aware that if you start earlier, you give more time for flexibility and the ability to pivot as well.
Okay. Do you think Explore Learning 11 plus prep adequately supports? Mm,
Yeesh. So okay, one thing I'll say is it's
yikes.
not my job to bash any other company or anything
Mhm.
like that. But the reality of what I see is um you can have a specified approach for your child. For example, I want my child to go to Highgate or Forest or any of these things. Explore Learning is brilliant. They do brilliant work, and I know they hire really, really good tutors. But they're group sessions. Group sessions don't necessarily work for every single child. And if you want something more specific, more one-to-one, you will pay a premium for that. But in terms of budget-wise, Explore Learning is great, and I understand why they're the first choice for many, many families. And if you are seeing that when you're doing the practice test and everything like that, and they do go to Explore Learning, continue it. Like, don't change it if it's broken. But I find it difficult because I know the type of work that I do and how much work I have to put into each and every single child that I'm preparing for 11 plus and things like that. If you are looking for a St. Paul's, I just personally don't think that 11, the kind of explore learning model is adequate enough, unless your child's a genius, by the way. If your child is already like very, very gifted and things like that, then yeah, you can get something just to top you up. But if you're pulling a child across the line and kind of bringing them from maybe mediocre to being able to compete with the cream of the crop, it becomes a bit more difficult to use the explore learning model. But that's not to say that it can't work, but I just think you need something a bit more, meaty and personalized when you are going for that, because they're essentially a high street brand, whereas someone like myself and Elaine, we're a bit more specialized. Yes, we do work for multiple schools and stuff like that, but explore learning is great for if you just need a top up in maths, like you're struggling a little bit and you want GCSEs to be a bit easier. Yeah, explore learning is great, but if you're looking to get to some of the best schools in the country, you may need something a bit more.
Yeah, yes. And I won't bash anybody, but I don't think that personally, I think explore learning is for the masses, and it's for if you're trying to get into middle of the road grammar schools, and the bottom line of it comes down to what is your plan for your child? Where do you want your child to end up, and doing the research that's needed for that. And I know we've gone over time, and I'm really sorry about that, guys. But we've got a couple more questions. What's your opinion on test centers for the 11 plus, Sam?
It depends how they're run. It really does depend on how they're run. Some are run very, very well, and you can look by their levers destinations. You can look at lots of different things. So it really would depend, because we have kind of a hybrid model. So depending on what our parents want, sometimes we do small group sessions, sometimes it's one-to-one. All of my students that are taking exams spend time with me during the holidays, and we do kind of intensive weeks. And it doesn't matter if we travel to their house or they come to our offices, or it doesn't matter. All of my exam students come in for that week, so we can do that iterative process that I was talking about. Because I feel like they need camp. So boxers have this thing called camp, whereby that's where you do all your heavy lifting. That's where you do your strength and conditioning and things like that. So especially that October half term and Christmas and all of that, we go into camp here, and we just make sure that everybody has a really, really good chance to be as prepared as they can be. Because the thing is, it's not about, hey, I'm doing 2 hours a week, well done for me. You have to immerse yourself in this, especially if you're going for one of these big schools, because every child learns at a different rate. And the way I teach is based on content rather than time. So for some of our students, they're with me, and this might sound extreme, but some are, I'm just be completely honest, they're with me the whole day. So they're coming about 10 and they're leaving about 6 o'clock. So they'll have like a really generous lunch. They'll have like a target for the day, but I need to make sure that I collect as much data. So if there's anything wrong, we can fix it and we can do that. And I can't do that in an hour and a half. Yes, that's good during term time and they're having their one-to-one sessions and we're learning content. But when it comes to exams and you're preparing for the final push, yeah, we have to immerse ourselves. And to be honest, the children enjoy it because they can see other children also there as well. They know that their mum is not the only one that's putting pressure on them. And it's just a nice environment for them to be around. And, I like having a bit of competition with them as well. So the one that, makes the most progress, gets a little prize and things like that. And it's just a really nice environment, to be honest. So, yeah.
Perfect. Caroline asked, what about GDST schools? Now, the GDST schools, do they use Athens? The GDST schools are follow-through schools. And I'm an alumni of GDST school, and different GDST schools have different criteria. So a GDST school in Croydon and a GDST school in Oxford going to have two very different criteria. And so my question to you, or my advice to you is understand the type of school that you're going for. Yes, Atom Learning is good for GDST schools, but Atom Learning is not really an 11 plus tool. even though they sell it as that. It's more of an I said pre-test tool. If you want to go for GDST schools, depending on what level you want to go for, if you want to go for scholarship level or if you just want to get in, you can get in. I've helped numerous parents get into GCSE school, especially my old school, on Bond's book, Schofield and Sims. Um, Exam technique is really important, and also having a relationship with the school. Listen, a relationship with the school goes so far, as well as being prepared. But because if a school knows you, they are more likely to offer you a place. I know that it's something that I shouldn't be putting out there, but it is something. A lot of parents apply to these schools, but they don't go to maybe the summer fete or the summer fair or get to know the school. Can I see my child in this school? So, Caroline, that's what I would do. Yes, some learning is good, but your foundations for the GCSE schools are Schofield and Sims, um, the website that Samuel was talking about, Test Plus, I think it's called, um, um, Bond's book, hammer them and make sure that you're at least 2 years ahead of the age group for your Bond's book or your Schofield and Sims. So go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. I've prepared a child for Croydon High, and yeah, they got an offer to Croydon High, and from memory, yeah, exam technique was very, very important. And another thing that I probably should have made more clear in my presentation is yes, each individual school has their own exams, but if they're good in one, there's no reason why they can't be good in another. It's just the time that you put for preparing the child. So yeah, just a kind of comprehensive GDSD schools tend to be quite comprehensive in terms of their 11 plus preparation. So good comprehension, good math skills. Some of them do non-verbal and verbal, but just from memory, it was maths and English that was the main thing for the child that I prepared
Yeah.
for Croydon High and stuff. Yeah.
And they also have an interview. So that's the second aspect of the test as well. So remember that it's not just about, and that's how they're able to see the children that have been completely tutored and have no interpersonal skills. So it's really important, like what Sam said earlier, to watch TV with your child, to go out, to talk about debates, what's happening in the country at the time, because that allows your child to talk about other things. Someone said, how do you encourage your
Yes,
child to read?
absolutely.
Mhm.
Just to add to that, Elaine, one thing that I definitely want to say about interviews is to use what you have. So, for example, I had a parent that was complaining to me that their son is too immersed in Formula One racing, and I was like, no, no, this is brilliant. So, what we did was when we were preparing him for his and interview for Whitgift and Trinity, he spoke about downforce. And because he was already interested in F1, you had, a 9-year-old going into an interview being able to explain really succinctly how an F1 car works and all of those things, and talking about physics that is even far beyond the scope of what he's expected to know at that age. So I do think, I don't think, okay, with interviews, you have to use what you have, because children will be interested in something, even if it's Roblox, gaming, whatever it is. Make sure they use what they have, because when schools are able to see personality, it really, really works in your favor. One thing that Elaine has taught me, actually, that I didn't realize at the time, is that when schools are offering bursaries, scholarships, essentially what they're doing is they are you're making a proposal for them of why they should invest in your child. And when you go into it with that kind of mindset, how you present yourself and how you market your child becomes completely different. And these are some of the secrets that just people don't know and they don't understand. Yes, the tutoring is important and stuff, but as Elaine said, relationship is key. That is the currency in which many of these schools work. Because a prime example of that is, if my surname was Sunak, I don't think I would have a problem getting into any of these schools. Why? Because of the draw of having my child in that kind of environment, or if my surname was Johnson or Cameron and things like that. All of these children, not all of them are going to be exceptionally prepared or things like that. So you also know how you need to know how to play the game a little bit as well and just gain that favor. But that's just one thing I wanted to add.
Thank you. I want us to finish up by 9.
Okay.
Um, Someone said, how do I encourage my child to read? I always say to parents, and you can answer this as well, I always say to parents that the way we learn how to read or you learn how to read might not be the same way your child learns how to read. So invest in audiobooks, invest in even talking with your child or reading the same book as your child, because children do as we do, not as we say. So if they don't see you reading, in their mind, they're thinking, why do I need to read? Also have good reading lists. It's also good to know that you're on scope. Have a conversation with the school. Where are they reading wise at school? And I think it's really, really important. Go ahead, Samuel.
Yeah, definitely. And what I'll do as well is I have a few reading lists that I can kind of curate and put together. So I'm going to send them to Elaine so she can distribute them throughout the community. I completely agree with Elaine. Do you read? If you're not reading, it's difficult to encourage your child to read. And yes, you may argue I don't need to read because I'm not the one taking the exam, but the environment in which a child is in all the time will dictate their behavior. So if they don't like to read, you need to think outside the box. There's more than one way to skin a cat.
Mm.
I'm Audible by Amazon. You can get like I think a month's free trial to read audiobooks. Radio, maybe when it's not too controversial, they can listen to some LBC. Subtitles, even
Even get a
graphic
Kindle for
novels.
your child as well. I
Yeah,
mean, my children were using Kindles from when they were 9, and that seemed, because it was an electronic device, it was better than they felt that it was better than a book. They weren't allowed to have loads of books in their boarding school, but remember, you can have 100 books on a Kindle, and your child
yeah.
could be reading that.
Video essays are really good as well. Video essays are a gem. They're a secret sauce that people don't know about. So what a video essay is basically like an explainer that you can watch, and you can watch it about anything, about politics, F1, even anime, Roblox, whatever it is. Somebody explaining how something works, or even geopolitics and stuff like that. Because what they can do is the books on which these are based off can then, be recommended and things like that. So video essays is another way that you can get your child learning content as well.
Okay, perfect. I think there's a couple of questions here that are quite specific to the families. And so what I won't do, so sorry for everybody, but I would advise you to get in touch with Samuel or in touch with myself, and then we can have a consultation and talk about that. So the question about boost your child's work ethic, I think that's a very personal question. So reach out to myself, reach out to Samuel, and we can help you with that. Like Samuel said, the product, the environment that your child is in is really important. What are the best materials for grammar school? I think you covered that at the beginning of this in your presentation, and you can reach out to me and I can send those resources to you. How do we join the network? So if you send an email to ecwalker@everythingseducation.com, I will send you the link to join the network and our community. Yvonne, you said he's based in South London, but you live in North London, Enfield to be precise. My child needs in-person tutoring. Yes, I do, but I would like to know why you think your child can only work with in-person tutoring, because my children were tutored from the age of 8 online. So I just need to find out from you why, Yvonne. Do send me a message and we can take it from there, because I think sometimes the online tutoring doesn't work because the tutoring is wrong, and a lot of parents experience bad online tutoring during lockdown, so they don't want to do it at all. So having a tutor in person doesn't necessarily mean it's a better product. What you're looking at is the expertise of the tutor. What do you think about that, Sam? So
Yeah,
I will,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think online tutoring can be hit or miss. Me personally, I do prefer teaching in person, and we are looking to expand the team to cover all of London, because I teach all over London anyway.
Mm.
But even if it's not possible in person, some of my clients, they live in Guildford and things like that, and we work out things for them whereby they can have kind of like a hybrid thing as well. So it really does depend. But yeah, like Elaine is saying, it would be interesting to know why you feel like it just absolutely can't work online. And yeah, we can definitely have a conversation and see what we can do going forward.
Okay. Somebody asked, where's the tutoring office? The tutoring office is in, am I allowed to share? It's in Croydon, isn't it? You're in
Yes, it
Croydon.
is. So we're near East Croydon Station. But again, myself, and my tutors, we travel all over London, but it's all to do with like availability and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are interested, please do get in touch, and yeah, we can have a conversation and see what we can put together for you.
Yes, Andrew Sola, you asked, can you share the recording? Unfortunately or fortunately, if you are in the Everything's Education community, you get the recording. If you're not, you don't get the recording. I'm really, really sorry, but that's one of the things that's one of the benefits of being in the community. And if anybody wants to join, like I said, send me an email, ecwalker@everythingseducation.com. Let me put that in the chat. And Sam, also tell us about you and what you are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on samtutoring.london. Best way to contact me is to fill out a booking form, and then I'll get back to you and we can have a conversation. We'll book in some time for a call, and I can understand what's going on with your family and your situation. I'll put the booking form in here now. And yeah, that's the easiest way to kind of get in touch with me. Obviously, you can send me an email. You can do all of those things however you feel comfortable. But for me, it's just easier when I get booking forms, because then I get a brief of kind of what the situation is, the help that you need. So when I'm replying to you, I know exactly what you're looking for, and I'm able to be of more help.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sam. We really appreciate you. Um, we really appreciate you. We really appreciate everything about you.
Thank you.
Do get in touch with him. Do get in touch with me, and let me see how I can help you, how he can help you. And we're looking forward to the next one, which is next Thursday, where we'll be talking everything 13 plus. Is that correct, Sam?
That's correct. We'll be going through common entrance and everything you need to know with that.
For that. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for coming on. I totally appreciate every single one of you.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Elaine.